Hello and welcome to the Backside Dig, the only podcast named after the coolest throw in football. Today I have a very special guest with the announcement of NFL players competing in the 2028 Olympic Games. I found someone who's competed in 11 on 11 football and flag football, leading the country of Italy and their national team. It's quarterback Luke Zahradka. Luke, how you doing?
I'm doing great today. How are you doing, Tyler?
Doing really, really good. Very excited to talk to you about some of the stuff on how your career's gotten to this point, and then also some flag football questions, especially as someone who's kind of felt out both games, what kind of feels different. But I think we'll start out with, some of your background. I mean, you went to college in the States, D2 at Bentley, didn't play very much there from what I've understood.
Nope.
And I was wondering, kind of as you're in Italy now, you've bounced around kind of Europe before then, like almost, 10 plus years ago now. What kind of led to that decision that you were going to go overseas, that you were going to take the football side of your career and, really pursue that, even though it wasn't going to be in the States?
Well, yeah, like you mentioned, I didn't play much in college, which kind of led to having like a chip on my shoulder. And basically, one of my first ever Pop Warner football coaches had a colleague whose son was playing overseas in Italy, actually. So after basically football was coming to an end in college, he's like, I think you should you should still try and play football because you have so much to get to the game. And he reached out to his colleague's son and asked like how he went about the process. And with that, I was able to basically make a Europlayers account, which is like a platform that people make to basically upload their highlights and data, whatever, to try and reach out to teams overseas. Obviously, not having too much film from college, I was able to put together a mini highlight from there, and then I also uploaded my high school highlights. And then with that, one team reached out from Germany. I was like, you know what, this is a good time, experience for me to like live overseas, kind of like study abroad, since obviously in college with spring practices, you don't get to do that too much as a football player. So I used it as like a study abroad and also just to continue doing what I love. And like you said, yeah, 10 plus years later, I'm still over here and kind of made a career out of it. And yeah, it's something that I'm very thankful for my first coach to, suggest this. And yeah, it's led to many great things for me and couldn't be more thankful for that.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a real like success story, especially for people who look at football so linearly, especially in the United States. They look at it as such a binary where it's like high school to like top rated high school in one of four states to D1 college to NFL. And I think a lot of people don't even look at some of the side routes and some of the ways that people can still pursue a career in the sport that don't necessarily involve the exact steps. I think that's why we're seeing more and more people that are starting to understand it when it comes to, even going to like JUCOs or starting to, move their careers in different directions. But I wanted to ask you kind of it's a similar question, but was the like what was the decision making process like on continuing football? Was it kind of always set in stone for you that you were going to that you're a football player, that you're somebody who was going to, even if it meant, traveling to different countries in Europe? Whether like was there ever a point where it was like maybe I'm not gonna keep playing football?
Yeah, actually. So after like spring semester, my senior year of college, I tried to explore going to a grad school somewhere, but because I had a year of eligibility still, so I was like, all right, let me try to explore this opportunity. Maybe look for some teams that their quarterbacks are graduating this way. 1 year you can play and see what may bring from that. But unfortunately, there was not many opportunities. I had reached out to like two schools in particular that I wanted to try to go to, but one wanted to go the route of like letting a freshman come in and play all 4 years, which I totally respected, and the other one didn't get back to me. So for me, I was like, all right, I guess my football, career is coming to an end, and I actually was going to pivot and look to play grad school baseball since in high school I was a pitcher. Got recruited to play from high school baseball as well. So I like went and like did all like the ACT test and things of that nature to like try to pursue like applying to some colleges because I'm from Long Island, so the school Hofstra University is like down the road from my house, and I was getting recruited to play there from high school. So I was looking to maybe go that route. And then, like I said, um, my first ever coach presented this opportunity to me. I was like, you know what, let me go on this website, upload the data, and my upload my profile essentially, because I was looking for jobs as well at the time, like a full-time job, just kind of like start into the real world. And then I went about it. I uploaded my profile, and then basically like a few days later, a team had contacted me, asked if I was interested to go out there. And then I was like, you know what, football has always been my first love. Like, as I mentioned, obviously I played football in college and chose that over the baseball route. So like it was always something that I loved doing. Being a quarterback, obviously, you're like a focal point of the team as you are as a pitcher. But I think that with being a quarterback, you're like the guy for the whole team, as opposed to like pitchers kind of, you're the star just because you're going against every single batter. But I think quarterbacking is just a different type of uh, aspect to it that I really enjoyed. And I was like, you know what, I need to like continue playing football, and that's kind of how I went about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and quarterback's kind of a different level of control, I guess, because I mean, a pitcher, you're not going the whole game, especially like, and if you do go the whole game, you might not be, might not be pitching for the next week. It's very like it's a very different process. But even touching on that, I mean, is that where you kind of felt that you grew kind of as, do you think that baseball kind of grew you as a passer, given the fact that they're both such rotational sports and so much of that like core strength comes from those hips and from those, being able to drive the
Hmm.
football from the ground?
I think they definitely complement each other for sure. So started playing football when I was like 5 years old, so from a very young age, and then basically started playing quarterback from when I guess quarterbacks were a thing back in the day. So like in the sense that when you're playing Pop Warner at 5 years old, like there's no real quarterback that's throwing the ball. So once that was like brought into the game, our coach, the same coach that introduced me to playing football overseas, like lined up the whole team and had like a throwing contest to see who could throw the ball the furthest and also like the straightest. And I came out on top on that, and that's kind of how I started playing quarterback. And then now, it's brought me to this playing out here. So yeah, it's been awesome.
So it definitely came from a lot of that
Yeah, for
that
sure.
that it came from literally a strength perspective. um but yeah, I mean, kind of fast forwarding a little bit past that, and we kind of talked about your move to Europe. What kind of made Italy home? Because you spent a year in the ELF, you spent some years in in France and Germany.
Yeah.
What kind of has made Italy over these like I said, like this last decade? Is it kind of just more so the combination of, hey, I'm performing well here, I like the organization, or is there something about the country itself and the cities you've been able to ingratiate yourself in? Is there something that's made that more of a home than the others?
To be honest, like every single place holds like there's a special part from that place that I really enjoyed about it. So, like you said, I started my career in Germany, then went to France, then I was in Italy in 2015 with this team called Ancona, which they are like more central Italy, and that was kind of when I obtained my double passport, which allowed me to start playing for the national teams. And then after that, I bounced to Prague, and then yeah, in 2017 to 2023, I was in Milan, which, like you said, is definitely like home for me because I had success there. I really enjoyed the city. Teammates become like brothers, and then playing in Italy for the season, I was able to also play for the national team for tackle, and then also flag football, which has also allowed me to play in different tournaments and continue to travel in like the world. So yeah, I would say that having success, um, just being around the guys, and just also having Italian roots for my family played a role in that. So it just all made sense for me to kind of stick around in Italy for a long time.
Yeah, and you mentioned before Italy, kind of that time in Prague for, what'd you say, it was about a year?
Yeah, so I went from 2015, I was in Italy, then I went to Prague in 2016. That year was when I started playing flag football. And then
Yeah.
2017, I came to Milan, and then we had success. We won 3 championships in a row, and basically it's just like, why leave at this point now? Because we're having success and I'm enjoying it. So it just made sense. The food's really good too here in Italy. So
Of course. Um, yeah, and you mentioned, kind of like you said, the year in Prague, and then I literally, like, the reason I even brought it up is because I have it noted that you said in a previous interview that that is where you like kind of started playing flag
Hmm.
football and got sort of into that landscape.
Yeah,
Um, what kind of what kind of drove you to do that? Was there a reason that you wanted to, or was it just kind of like, hey, this is an opportunity. This sounds like fun.
yeah,
I'm
that's exactly the reason
going
why, to
along.
be honest. So the head coach had reached out to me saying, "Hey, our current quarterback might not be able to play in this flag football tournament. It was the World Championships that year." He's like, "Would you be interested? We're playing in the Bahamas." And I was like, "Do I have to pay for this?" He goes, "No, it's all taken care of by by the federation." I was like, "All right, say less, I'm in." So that's kind of how I dove into the flag football world, and then the tournament actually got canceled in the Bahamas because there was two federations that were like fighting over each other, and then it got hosted actually in Miami in Florida. So I was like, I'm going back to Miami to play this tournament. Like that's not as exciting as playing in the Bahamas, but it is what it is, and that's kind of how I got introduced to flag football. And then from there, I just never looked back. Kept playing, and like basically every year from then on, we always had tournaments, whether it be like the European Championships, the World Championships, and then obviously 2 years, 3 years ago now, the World Games. So it was just an experience that I was like, I got to take advantage of this, and still doing it today.
Yeah, and like you said, that's led to success. It's led to more opportunities to play with the Italian national team. And with the Italian national team, you said that you've represented them, both playing tackle and flag football. And I had a bit of a question about playing for them, the Italian national team in tackle football, because, the United States doesn't really have that much of a, you know, that kind of system. We don't really take our team
Yeah.
overseas.
Hmm.
Um, we are now just starting to do it for flag football. And I was wondering, what kind of is the process like there, considering how in depth of a sport football is and how complex so many of the elements are? What is the time frame on that? Because obviously you have a normal, your Italian league football season for the spring, and then you go
Hmm.
into like trying to perform with your national team. What is it like, kind of building camaraderie with those guys? I mean, obviously you're playing against and with some of them, but what is it like trying to gain some of that and then also learn the plays that are being thrown at you for your national
Yes.
team?
So sometimes in like the off season, they'll have like camps where they'll invite 100 people to go to like this one location where for the weekend you practice and basically try out, and that's kind of how like they format practices. Or sometimes during the Italian league, if there's like an off weekend, they'll like have like another camp like during that, because there's always something that we're preparing for. Let's see. Yeah, like I don't think there's ever been a world championship for tackle in a long time. I think maybe the last time that happened was in 2014, if I'm not mistaken. Um, so we've always had like European championships, and whether it was that preparing for that or like the qualifiers where you get set up in a group where it's like, all right, Italy, then we had Switzerland and Denmark this last year to play for like the qualifiers for this year. So this year now there's like the semifinals where Team Italy will play against Finland and in the semifinals, and then the other group is Germany versus Austria. So there's always stuff to prepare for. But yeah, building camaraderie, like I do play with some of those guys, obviously in the Italian league. Those other guys that you don't play with, you have to build that timing and stuff like that for routes and whatnot. So it does take time. But then also playing with some of those guys in flag football as well, like you get to feel, it's like you get more reps by playing and practicing in the national team, which is great. So it definitely takes time to build that camaraderie, as you said. But having played for many years, I kind of know more or less all the guys, unless there's someone that's like younger, that's like coming up into the program, where you got to like try and build that timing and stuff like that with those guys.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, yeah, I mean, even with the flag football team, you only got, five guys, including yourself, on the field at once, and
Yeah.
only a couple more guys on the roster after that. So it's like there's so few guys, and it's such a different experience. I can only
Hmm.
imagine trying to gain some of that camaraderie. Like you said, luckily you have it with some of the guys that you've played with or
Hmm.
you've kind of formed relationships with, considering you've been doing this for quite a while. Um, as for the European Championships, the qualifiers were last October, right?
Hmm.
And
Correct.
then
So basically, there was 12 teams, four groups of three teams, and then you do like a round robin like within your group, and the team that finishes on top from there then like advances to the semifinals for the next year, and they rank the teams like in that qualifiers from like the previous European Championship, if that makes sense. So like 2023, Team Italy finished third, so we were like the head of one of those four groups. And
mm,
basically, then they like go like the rankings from like 1 to 12, and they form out the groups. And now you play against each team once in your little group. So we played against Denmark and Switzerland. We won both games. So now this year we qualify for the semifinal, like to basically play for the European Championship. So if we beat Finland in October this year, then we'll advance and qualify for the finals, which would be either against the winner of Austria, Germany. And how they formed out of this year is a little different, where we play. I think it's like the 24th of October is the first game, and then like the 27th is the second game. So it's like 2 games in 3 days, which is kind of unheard of in football land. But
yeah,
that's just kind of how they did it this year, which it is what it is. You got to just go with the punches sometimes. Football in Europe maybe is a little different than football in America, let's say, with aspect of that. So,
yeah. I mean, I'm trying to think of. I mean, even when you think of American football, you think of having maybe a Sunday game, then a Thursday night game in the
right.
NFL. Oh,
Yeah.
and that's 4 days in between. Or I'm thinking of the COVID season where there were games on Tuesday and then maybe Sunday or late in the season, sometimes Saturdays.
Hmm.
And even that's like 4 or 5 days. And there are a lot of people arguing, hey, this is not enough time to give these guys to recover.
For
And
sure.
then on top of that, you've got 2 games in, like you said, like 3 days.
And
So
and this, you're playing a semifinal and then potentially a final like in 3 days. It's not like it's a regular. I mean, it's a football game at the end of the day, but like the how important that game is like, can I get at least a little more time to like recover for to try to put on the best performance possible for like that final? So, but
yeah, it's physically, obviously, it's the toll is kind of the same, like,
mhm,
but then also mentally, like, not only trying to mentally kind of grasp, hey, this could be a championship, but
mhm.
also, hey, this is like this is another game in 3 days. How, like, preparing for what
Yeah,
you're going to see is
exactly. Yeah.
got to be next level, considering the the weeks that they give NFL teams and going into the playoffs. Or I'm just thinking of the NFL playoffs and the fact that you could have a first round bye and not play your first week, and then you have like 2 weeks off for your first playoff game, and all you're sitting there doing is preparing and working out, staying ready. But yeah, no, it's a definitely a different experience. And I think that a lot of people kind of gain that they don't really have that knowledge of how football works overseas, because they're kind of the under the expectation that we're the only country that really plays.
Yeah.
uh but now, with flag football coming to, like, with United States NFL players now playing overseas rather than just the American flag football players, it's going to be a bit of an interesting dynamic, because of the fact that you've had these American teams that have won championships, like the World Games where you played against the US in 22, where it's a championship winning team, and now you've got guys coming in that haven't necessarily learned the sport they're going to be playing, but are under
Hmm.
the expectation, because of the fact that it's football, that they're going to be on the team. And everyone's kind of talking about, hey, who's a good fit the US flag football team, now that you can have all these guys, and people are trying to make arguments for all the best players in the league. And as somebody who's done both, as somebody who's played, you know, 11 on 11 more traditional tackle football and
Hmm.
5 on 5 flag, which they're going to be playing at the Olympics. I was wondering, just from the quarterback position, which your team Italy played a more, I would say, even when you compare it to the US, a much more traditional style of football, where it was a lot more drop back, quick passing, timing game,
Yeah.
kind of trying to work intermediate areas. Even for you, what does that difference in feel like? Because of the fact that, the field's smaller, you're playing with less guys, there's no, linemen on either side of the ball. And the fact
Right.
that also means, I mean, I guess a little bit taken off your shoulders because there's no protections. But, like, what does the difference in feel like for somebody who is playing for Team Italy on their tackle national stage and Team Italy on their flag national stage?
Yeah. So my first year of flag football, I definitely struggled a little bit because there's a learning curve for sure in flag and in tackle. Like again, defenses can play like cover two or like cover three, but like guys rotate in different slots, and the field being a lot smaller, you need to really work spacing there. I think another difference, again, like you mentioned, there's no line, so yeah, you're not like going to get blindsided, but there's a rusher who's starting at 7 yards from the ball who has a free go at you. So you need to know like, all right, I need to make my reads quick because if I don't, like, I'm going to get sacked. Obviously, I am not one of the more mobile guys, so Team USA plays more of a dynamic offense where they hand the ball, or they snap the ball to one guy, toss it to the quarterback, and now that quarterback is eligible to run because they basically gave him the second touch from when the ball was snapped. So now they can do that. But for us, we do a lot more just traditional, like snap the ball to the quarterback, have four guys on routes, make your reads, and try to pick the defense apart. That's kind of how I approach the game. I think if you're, as a quarterback, if your first read's there, like the check down, like not check down, but like the short route, just I like to take that because in flag, you know, it's hard to take a flag off of someone. So a lot of times, like you can throw like a slant route or like a flat route rather, and now like that guy's going to maybe gain like 10, 15 yards after the fact because if he makes the first guy miss with the flag, like he can just keep going. So there's definitely a lot of differences, and I think that as you mentioned, like with all this talk of the NFL guys just being able to like hop on a team and just like perform really well, like I'm not saying they can't because obviously those guys are some of the best athletes in the world, but it is a different sport. You know, they're so used to maybe like trying to stiff arm someone where if you do that in flag football, you're going to get fouled because you can't flag guard or make any contact. And same thing on defense. Like you can't press and jam someone because that's a flag. You can't really, like, there's no contact allowed in flag football. It's more about just, covering a guy and trying to make a play on the ball. So it's not like, someone who's really well known for like locking guys up at the line of scrimmage is because they're getting physical at the line and like not letting them get off the line. But if you try and do that in flag football, like you're going to get fouled every single time. So yeah, there's definitely a lot of differences in flag when it comes to that. And for a quarterback aspect, like you have your route concepts that are very similar, like smash concept, things of that nature, which are the same. But there are different concepts where you have guys doing crazy routes because you can, and like just have like hitch outs, which they have in football too. But like the way that you format it and play it off is because the field being so much smaller, those different like combinations have a better effect in flag because there's not there's not many guys that can like, all right, if I move one guy, like that's basically gonna be open now. Where in tackle, it's like if I move that one guy, maybe I know a linebacker like goes into that area because your eyes are looking that way. So it's definitely a different sport where you need to like really play it and get experience before you can, I think, master it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I think when you think of even the quarterback position, so many of the guys that we look at as so great at what they do, even on the NFL level, so many of them, it's because they have an understanding of NFL coverages and
Hmm.
NFL like scheming, like you said, even cover three versus cover two, and like knowing where to attack on a certain defense. But when you're rotating that like a safety down in the NFL, you're playing on a field that's 53 and a third yards wide. You're playing on a flag football field that's 25 yards wide. You're not. It's less of a coverage game, more of a space game
Yeah,
where you're not really like saying, okay, this guy rotated down here, he won't be able to recover. It's a lot easier to recover when you're playing on a field that's less than half the width. So yeah, like you said, it's like I can imagine, especially on the back end, it sometimes is even a different kind of complex because of the fact that these guys are moving all around and you're just kind of trying to dictate where the space is going to be rather than okay, I see a too high safety look, let me beat this with this.
for
Like
sure. And in flag football too, like a lot of guys or a lot of defenses will like based on the first cut from where like an offensive player cuts, they like will lock in man and go after that. So it's not like all right, cover two as you mentioned, like they're gonna be two safeties high. It's like it can start like that, but now if I'm pressing and we have a cross, those guys aren't going to stay in their zones. They're going to like now lock on that man because that's the responsibilities of like that defense. Like it's kind of crazy to think about, but like it's just a different sport, like altogether, in my opinion. Like flag from
Yeah, I
tackle.
mean, and you see it like you said, those route concepts. I'm thinking of because I recently rewatched that World Games final
Hmm.
and thinking about some of the stuff you guys were trotting out where you're running like these longer developing out and up kind of routes. You had like a wide open touchdown down the left sideline to somebody,
Hmm.
and it was like a there was a some sort of like double move out and up kind of deal. And it's like you had the guys trying to just take space going over the middle and then him going up the sideline. And I'm thinking just like as much as we do see teams trying to now more than ever manipulate space to give their quarterbacks an easier time so they don't have to read as much of the field, that game, like the way you're describing it, is almost all a space read rather than a, hey, this is what we're being given. We can actually work with this.
For sure. Yeah, and again, the U.S. defense was really good. That game, I think we did a good job like playing that game against them. We were like right with them at halftime. Unfortunately, I think our like PATs was kind of like hurt us in the end because they're really good at going for two, and that's another thing. Like we're in flag where teams go for 2 points, and if you get three scores and you get three 2 point conversions, now you're at 24 points already. And for us, we didn't get any, so we had to score 4 times to get to 24 points. And now
Yeah.
like they only had to score 3 times, and it's they're a really good team. Again, they have some of their best athletic players playing flag football that aren't in the NFL, let's say, and some of those guys also were playing Division 1 football at one point. I know one
Yeah.
of the guys on that roster was also an ex Buffalo Bill, so like those guys, they're not just guys who don't play tackle football and then just like occupy and take flag. Like those are guys that are really good athletes that come to the flag world because their NFL careers are over and they want to just continue playing football, and now they make that transition. But I'm sure those guys worked really hard to like learn the sport, and it wasn't their first year playing, like stepping in, like, all right, now I'm on the national team. They had to probably compete for many years because I knew they have some flag leagues in the States that are really competitive. And, those guys are the ones that kind of try out for the national team in the end.
Yeah. And I mean, even now, like the flag circuit has kind of become a breeding ground for talent that moves up per
Mhm.
se to like the
Yeah.
NFL level or the college level. And like you're seeing all these kids who are playing 7-on-7, like which is obviously I would say a lot closer to NFL football, at least in the
Hmm.
fact that the spacing is closer, but still they're all playing. And yeah, I mean, you mentioned it with that USA team and how kind of wacky some of the stuff they run is when you're somebody who has a tackle football eye. I mean, they have their quarterback who's set, and then they're running like a two
Yeah.
man game with
Hmm.
him and essentially their running backs in the backfield where you can have either guy throw it or they do the pitch back so he's eligible, especially on those 2 point conversion or like red zone type of plays where you can't run the ball anymore.
Hmm.
What kind of emphasis would you place if you were building a flag football team, maybe without, say, yourself as a coach, on having people that are, you know, sort of space eaters at the quarterback position where maybe you're not looking at somebody who's like, all up here kind of picking you apart, but also having somebody who can give you some of that 2 point conversion luck because like you said, that was kind of the space in the game. What kind of created the difference was the fact that they had guys who just kind of were burning to the edges a lot
Yeah.
more than
Yeah. So they do a really good job of that. Like, Hoosh, I know him really well. He's a good friend of mine. He's a really good guy. He's a baller, and like he's been at the top of his game for many years and just is a ridiculous flag football player.
yeah,
But for example, like they do that two quarterback system too because now if you think about it, you have to respect those two guys and you need to keep two guys on them because if you have one guy going back and forth, that guy's going to have a long day and just be winded. But
yeah,
if you have two guys down, now you're only three deep, right? Because there's only five guys on the field. So now there's more spacing to work with. And if you got athletes, those guys just run and they can, jump high, catch the ball. So now you can just play that game where you can either throw it to the other guy and have like him either give it back to you or run himself, or you look downfield and now you have like a lot more space to work with because there's that one guy less that's occupying the coverage areas in a defense. But if I had to build a team, like I would definitely probably want someone that could to do that and can play at least have two guys that can throw the ball. This way you can do that two quarterback system. But for me, again, I'm more of the headsy guy and more of a guy that likes to just use my arm to my strength, to the best of my ability, and like be able to like pick teams apart with different arm angles and stuff. Because again, in flag football, there's never a time where I feel like I'm like sitting there and like throwing the ball like as a normal technique. I'm more like just using my hips to rotate and like just taking the arm like from like a lot of different angles to avoid the rush. Since he's like in my face, you got to be able to you know go from those different arm slots basically.
Yeah, there's never a time where you're sitting, clean because because obviously with nobody blocking for you, yeah. And I mean that's kind of the thing with quarterbacking. If you just watch any flag football tape at that level, it is so much about how much can you manipulate and how you can manipulate. Like you mentioned Hoosh, and like their team looks like basketball on grass. Like it's just the amount of times where they are running out and he's throwing like almost these hook shots down the field and just like hoping you got big enough guys who can go essentially rebound for you, go get them and create
Yeah,
explosives that way. And I mean, one kind of, final question on that scheming thing, I guess more in the team building aspect, because that's what I'm thinking about is, what NFL guys could we see at that level? There's a very loud bird outside. But like just thinking about what NFL guys we could see at that level or how they're going to build the team of NFL and flag guys. Do you think it's more important, say, to have receivers and guys, your eligible targets who are maybe necessarily bigger bodies, better jump ball guys because of the fact that that space is so confined and the fact that, you know, you're not going to win with speed burning a guy 50 yards across the field because there's no 50 yards to get to?
yeah. I mean, yes, in some aspect, but also if you have a Tyreek Hill that's running a fly, I mean,
Yeah.
you got to respect that. And now, if you like back off, you can just throw a hitch to him and let him just work the field. Because in flag football, once the ball's out and someone has the ball, like the offensive guys need to stop. And now it's basically the
One
guy
on
who has
five.
ball, yeah, 1 on 5, and you need to have speed obviously to be able to shake guys and do stuff like that. But the way that the U.S. in particular played, like with just taking a lot of deep shots, like I think having a big body, because they had Bruce Mapp on their team who was a really a bigger body that was really good at high pointing the ball, and it's like there could be three defenders like in the area, but just being so much bigger and getting the ball at its highest point, like you can't really defend it unless you're making contact, which then you get fouled. You could get called for a foul. So I think it's a mix of both. Bigger bodied and fast guys is probably the way to go for a flag team.
Yeah. I mean, the way you're even describing it, I'm thinking of more of like an old school kind of football mindset where you have your two receivers out on the outside. Like just thinking of in my brain, like having of your four targets, maybe two of those guys are your big guys, and then
Hmm.
your slot guys are your speed types. And I think like the NFL has moved away from that because of their understanding. Hey, we have so much space to work with. We don't even necessarily need a guy who's 6'4" and can high point the ball because we're going to be throwing to space,
Yep.
picking apart zone coverages. And if you have a guy like a Tyreek Hill, you're never going to see man coverage. So it's like, hey, if this guy can just be fast enough to get to his spot, we can throw it to his spot. And I mean, I think even flag football now, thinking of it in that way, is almost a little bit more traditional, old school in the way that
Hmm.
they do prioritize size.
For
Um,
sure.
and one more last question, a little bit of a fun, jokey one. Like come that World Games time, I think you might know where I'm going with this. The physical playbook that you
Yeah.
had and like looking at it and like
Yeah.
people were like the broadcast is like what am I seeing right now, and they're constantly ragging on you about the book, and I was wondering what is kind of that play call process like, because of the
Hmm.
fact that I mean, like, is it as simple as in that book you have like these route concepts and you're just like, hey, this is what it is, or is
Yeah.
it?
So with that, obviously that was a big talking point for the World Games. We've been using that since I started playing flag football. That was kind of like how the Italian team went about it, and you were allowed to have us book, and basically our OC would be like, all right, let's go with play number 45. And then you open the book, go to play 45, and there's the design. How it was like designed with that was like based off of like formation. So like either two, like trips you could have, or two guys and one, or like a bunch, things of that nature. And then obviously like, we had plays that were specifically for like 1 point conversions, 2 point conversions. That's kind of how like the play was built. The playbook was built. There was 100 and something plays in it, so it's a lot of plays. But again, at the end of the day, you're not probably using them all. You're going to use like the ones that are successful. Again, there's like little variations between maybe like play 35 and 36 might have like a small variation to it. But then also on some of our plays too, like there's ways that we can call audibles where there's different colors. We have like red, black, green, and blue are the four receivers. And it's like if you want to have someone do a different route in the playbook itself, there would be like like drawn with like a dot. So if you want to call like, all right, I want that route, so you just call like we would just kind of call that color, and then he would know like, all right, I need to do that route, and then like that's kind of how it was designed and how it's came about, and then obviously they put an end to it, unfortunately. But I thought, I mean, I enjoy using the book because, like, again, it was a lot of talk of like the World Games and like, oh, like the quarterback from Italy like has this the playbook Bible, whatever, like on it. It was pretty funny, whatever. But now we still have a kind of a similar system where we just have like wristbands, and then basically the whole playbook is like cut out onto like the wristbands. And now, like, if we have play like 55 and I don't have that on my wristband, like I'll just change it with whoever has that on their wristband, and then basically we just go from there and like look at that, and then I show them like the wristband, like, all right, this is the play we're doing. Let's and then they look at it, and then we go out and basically execute. But
Yeah.
yeah,
No, that's definitely, yeah, it's interesting because, like, I mean, I think now you're seeing more than ever, like, as I keep kind of comparing it to the NFL level for a level of understanding, you're seeing more and more teams kind of go by the wristband and the hey, let me not give you a 15-word play call.
for
Let me
sure.
just give you a number so then you can get it out and actually figure out what you're doing rather than getting to the line with 5 seconds left. And you hear about some of these coaches like Sean Payton, who's given, you know, 13, 15 word play calls and
That's
like
great.
putting a lot on quarterbacks and a lot on weapons too, because you got to be listening to your part. But yeah, I mean, it's definitely interesting to see like how that kind of worked. And with the book itself, obviously it kind of became like a little bit of like a phenomenon amongst the people who were watching of like, hey, this
Hmm.
this guy's literally like opening pages while he's like about to snap the ball. And it's just like that stuff's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, any
Uh,
if I mean, that's just, it's really, it is just like a fun thought experiment kind of, because the fact that we're kind of crossing over these two worlds, and the fact that regardless of the fact that they're kind of played with the same ball and there are things that are the same, they are two totally different sports. And with that, I do say I really do appreciate you coming on and talking through some of this with us, talking through your career, talking through some of the X's and O's, kind of what goes into building and playing on a flag football team. But yeah, I really appreciate it.
yeah, I appreciate you taking the time to reaching out to me. That was awesome. I wasn't expecting to see someone mention me on X saying, "Hey, look at this throw by this Italian quarterback." I was like, whoa, that's me. And then, yeah, no, thanks so much for bringing me on here. It was great talking to you. And hopefully in the upcoming years, I'm still around and competing in the Olympics. We'll see.
Would love to see it. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Tyler.
Sounds good.